It is comparison time. We have Steve Reeves versus Bob Paris. You guys wanted to see this one. Of course, Steve Reeves, a 1940s and 50s bodybuilder. He only competed once in the 50s, but still, he was a 40s and 50s athlete. And Bob Paris, an 80s and 90s bodybuilder. So this is going to be very interesting. But before we begin, here's a tasty glimpse of the garments that Steve wore. Look at this sweatshirt. It is a humdinger and a half. Look at that. Wow. He's a sharp looking dude, too. Do we have any sweatshirt pictures from Bob Paris? Well, it's a turtleneck. I just wanted to, compare the garments that they wore. Do you guys know that I met Steve at one point? I don't have any pictures of it. Oh, I guess they do have a picture of it. Take this down, please. I said take it down. Take it down now. Take it down, take it down, take it down. Wow. Don't know where they found that one, but I'll do everything in my power to have that removed. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is 40s versus 80s. There is advancements in size, muscularity, and it is obvious. Is it that obvious? I think this picture's been tampered with for Steve. Do you guys think it's been tampered with? Here is a very familiar picture of Steve, and you can tell he was a little bit extra jacked in that picture. That's a different picture of Bob Paris, too. Bob, obviously, he is a bigger, more muscular creature, a little bit shorter, don't you know? Now, there is similarities. Obviously, they're both very aesthetically pleasing, but I definitely remember seeing Bob Paris, and he would pose. If it was on TV, I think it might have been on TSN, the Total Sports Network, or whatever they give us in Canada. But they would always compare Bob Paris with Steve Reeves. When he would pose, they would say, the announcers would say, he's like Steve Reeves. They would always say that. And they'd mention Frank Zane in the comparison with Bob Paris. But anyway, go to the front double bicep pose. I don't think these guys are very similar at all. I think the similarities stop at the hairdo. They're both handsome men, and they both have very similar hairdos. But, you see, Bob was very lean for his time, so he was about the same size as Reeves. More muscle, obviously, to compete with the guys in the 80s, but trust you me, for his time, Steve Reeves was a far superior bodybuilder than Bob Paris ever thought of being. Yes, Bob has his followers, he has his fans, he has an outstanding physique. Why not? But you have to think, there should be a lot more evolution here than this. But having said that, if you were going to take it serious and say, well, who's winning the bodybuilding competition? Obviously, Bob Paris. The conditioning alone would be enough. Now there is posies like the... I apologize. Like the front lat spread, that Bob Paris, this is not the best shot for him. He'd still maybe outmuscle in the wheels and the legs, things of that nature, Steve. But look at Steve's lats. Camera, granted, is down low, so that's why I made him shorter than Bob. Don't you size police get on me about this front lat spread. Look at the height of his shoulders. So you definitely have to take all things into consideration, like camera angle, all of that. And like I mentioned time and time again, when there's more than 2 or 3 decades, unless you're talking late 90s, early 2000s to now, not much evolution, but anytime before that, you can't compare condition-wise, camera angles. But we like to make hypotheses. And if these guys were playing on the same track, had the same gear, same start, upbringing, things of that nature, Steve would still get him in the front lat spread. It's just a better pose for the man. Turn to the side. They even did that side chest back in the 40s. Wow, this is history in the making back then. So yes, Look at the difference. The muscle, just so much more in the 80s. But think about it, guys. There was no gear, maybe a little bit. If Reeves was on the gear, it wasn't that much. And it was the training alone. They had to do everything. They had to walk everywhere they went. They didn't get to have the luxuries of resting. Even if you wanted to change the channel, you had to get up off your butt. But there wasn't much to watch on TV back in the 40s anyway, I can imagine. So you guys know where I'm getting at. It's just not fair to compare. But having said that, Bob, he looks pretty good. But for the 80s, most of the guys were a lot bigger than him. Let's face it. Let's have a look at the backs. This is interesting. This is very interesting. And I'm not a Bob hater because he's gay. I don't care if he's gay. That don't make no difference to me. Some people like hot dogs. Some people like 2 slabs of bologna. But having said that, his back wasn't the best. Might be beating Steve Reeves. Maybe. And that's 80s versus 40s, guys. He should be beating him no problem. But I think it would be a problem. Steve Reeves had a good back for his time, and like I said, you can't compare Steve Reeves. Well, you can. I do. I am right now. But as far as their careers, are you kidding me? Steve Reeves was the best bodybuilder in the world, best built man on the planet. Bob Paris, well, actually, a lot of people did think he was one of the best built men on the planet, even though he was not placing very well. I think 8th or something foolish like that at the Mr. Olympia event. But the weaker back could have been a main contributor to that. Here's an abs and thigh, and you know what? This is like classic physique. Obviously, there's more muscle on Bob Paris than Steve Reeves, but the same type of physique still, it's popular. With classic physique now, it is it's like paying homage to the Steve Reeveses. I mean, for his time, trust me, Steve was the biggest, most muscular freak on the stage. Probably still outmuscling John Grimmick. Maybe Reg Park, but even when they competed, Reg wasn't that big. Steve, for his time, was a mass monster. He really was. So, having said that, lads and laddises, hope you enjoyed this comparison. It is what it is. You're not going to be able to tell who's winning based on the physiques that they were able to obtain for their time. So you can't say one guy was better than the other when one was in the 40s and one was in the 80s, or even in the 70s there was a huge leap. Advancements, things of that nature. So Steve, for his time, still probably the best. It's always arguable. Say John Grimmick was better than him, but I think he was better than Grimmick, but he was losing to Grimmick. Some say that Reeves was not as good as Reg Park, but he was beating Reg Park, so then he retired. Anyway, Steve Reeves versus Bob Paris is in the history books for Mark's Max Muscles channel. Reeves, obviously, the much superior bodybuilder, winning. I'll say Steve Reeves is the very first ever famous bodybuilder, nameable bodybuilder, that ever won a Sandow statue. You go ahead, tell me who else won one before him. Would have been the guy that won the great competition in 1901, the Eugene's competition. I think it was William Murray, if I'm not mistaken. It's good to know, you know. But then the second and third place guys also won a Sandow, so I guess the guy placing third would have received his Sandow first, so it's just semantics. We'll say Steve Reeves. It's easier. Have a great one, guys.